undergrad in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where I worked at a nonprofit there called Impact Tulsa. Impact Tulsa is an organization that also kind of focuses on cradle to career outcomes. So anything from early childhood to post-secondary attainment, they focused on that all throughout the city of Tulsa. And they also work with My Brother's Keeper, which is an initiative through the Obama Foundation to provide resources and tools of social and forward economic mobility to boys and young men of color. And so Tulsa was a model community, and I had the privilege of being able to work on what they call one of their chapters or columns. And so there's key milestones within that, and I was the third milestone, which is access to post-secondary attainment. And aside from that, after working in Tulsa, I got an opportunity to come to the Clinton School of Public Service, which is what brought me to Little Rock. I came on a scholarship, so I was very grateful for that. And it's been great. I got to work my first year with another organization called Mamas Unidas. And so Mamas Unidas is an organization that provides resources and tools for Hispanic students and Latino students in Central Arkansas to basically access and overcome the barriers to post-secondary attainment. And so my first year here was my practicum year was me doing research, conducting interviews, focus groups, and surveys, and kind of being able to promote data so they'd be able to implement that in their strategy, but also use it for future grant writing and opportunities like that. Last summer, the Clinton School focuses on international projects as much as it does national projects. And so I got to go and work in Mexico City. And so my family being from Mexico, it was much different. It was a much different experience because the Mexico that they left in the 1980s and 90s was a much more dangerous and corrupt country. And so when I told them I was going to go work in the prison system in Mexico, uh, they weren't so happy. And so I went and I worked on a grant writing team. And what we do there is we also provided tools and resources to women who are incarcerated. The judicial system in Mexico is very biased toward women. And so in the United States, we have laws that kind of allow for self-defense. In Mexico, if you were to defend yourself against your husband, for example, you would be incarcerated. And so about 91% of women who are incarcerated in Mexico are victims of gender-based violence. And in Mexico, the incarceration system is much different. You're responsible for everything, including the clothes on your back. So your family typically donates clothes. And when I went, I was surprised because there was children in the jails. And I asked if that was visitation hours. And I learned that in Mexico, um, motherhood is one of the most divine things that a person can experience. And so you are allowed to have your children in the prison with you until they're 6 years old. And so it's much different than you would think, here in the United States. In Mexico, most people, it's monotheistic or monocultural. And so everybody has some of the same lived experiences, most cultural backgrounds. And so the prisons are not the safest place, but they're not the most dangerous. And I actually enjoyed my time there, which is interesting to say. But I got a call while working in Mexico City that there was an opportunity here in Little Rock, which was at Seis Puentes. And I had never heard of Seis Puentes before. And so in September of last year, I moved back to Little Rock. I thought I was going to stay in Mexico, and I ended up back in Little Rock. And so I'm happy to be here. And I'm so, so glad that I get to not only lead this amazing organization, but also kind of get to do work for a community that is very reflective of the community that I grew up in, which is based solely for immigrants and first generation Americans. I'm actually going to take this off and then maybe I'll just hold it because I'm a little tall. Um, so what is here? Oh, you can see it. Okay, good. So what is Seis Puentes? So Seis Puentes is a 501(c)(3) organization based in Northern Little Rock, but we serve all of Central Arkansas, and we exist to kind of fill in the gaps that are created and expand opportunities for immigrants and Latine families here in Central Arkansas. We do this through education, community connection, and access to essential resources. We also work to ensure that every individual is treated with dignity and equipped with the tools for success and empowered to thrive. So we believe that when families are supported, entire communities grow stronger. Let me know that the way. So one of the biggest things, I think that when I moved to Little Rock, I wanted to identify because Seis Puentes, I'd never heard of it before. And I worked with Mamas Unidas for an entire year. And while I was in Tulsa, I was the manager of strategic partnership and collaboration. So my job was to know other organizations and people in the community. And so when I had heard about Seis Puentes in Mexico City, I was like, oh, I've never heard of them. So um, one of the biggest things about coming to Little Rock was basically making sure that if I got involved with Seis Puentes, that I was going to do everything I could to make sure that people knew it existed. And by doing that, you have to know kind of what are the biggest barriers, what are the kind of the biggest constraints that a lot of people in the region are facing. And so the biggest here in Central Arkansas specifically is language barriers, access to documentation, limited education or educational opportunities, and then just plain and simple systems not being built for people. I know because I grew up in Northern California that I was very fortunate. I did not know when I moved to Oklahoma that there was such a large population of Latino people. And then when I moved to Arkansas, equally, I never expected that there would be such a large population of Latinos. And um, and so for me, that was incredibly disheartening because in California, the resources and the tools and the access that we have it doesn't matter your documentation status. And so when I moved out here and I learned that, there are people who do not have access to food supplementation. There's people who don't have access to identification through driver's licenses. I was kind of mortified. Growing up in the Central Valley, that you don't necessarily know about people's documentation status because it doesn't matter. In California, you're kind of more so treated as a contributing member of society, which you are, you pay taxes. And so it was really interesting to me because I think one thing that often gets missed is that a lot of these folks who come to this country have American children. And so what's happening is when you deny their parents opportunity, you're denying American children opportunity to grow and to move forward in society. And I picture myself. I couldn't imagine if my mom didn't have access to food supplementation. I couldn't imagine if my mom didn't have a driver's license and she couldn't put a light bill in her name. And so these are a lot of the challenges that people here in Arkansas face. At Seis Puentes, we have and operate the City of North Little Rock ID program, which I'll talk about in a second. And it's one of the last in the state, and it's operated through a loophole. And so it's kind of a privilege, it's kind of exciting, also very unfortunate at the same time. But we have people who come as far as from Northwest and they ask if they can get an ID. Now, because of the rules, you're only allowed to issue IDs if you live within the city limits of North Little Rock. Um, so I'm working with a couple of folks and organizations right now to see what we can do to expand access to identification. And so hopefully that's something that we can work on within the next political cycle. Um, but yeah, so like I said, I take a lot of what I know as an individual and I like to replicate that into my work. And so there's a lot of things that people aren't necessarily aware of. And it's easy to kind of miss a lot of these things. But yeah, and so let me just move on here. So Seis Puentes, before I started, we didn't necessarily keep metrics and we didn't necessarily have um, a solid foundation. Seis Puentes was started in 1998 and it was known as Butterfly Community Ministries. And that was with support from the United Methodist Church, the First United Methodist Church in North Little Rock. In 2009, it grew from being in the community of Levy to kind of serving more the city of North Little Rock. And because there was such a need within the Hispanic community, they decided to dedicate it specifically to immigrants in the Hispanic community. And so it went from being Butterfly Community Ministries to Seis Puentes, which is what we know today. And the reason for the name change was because butterfly within the Hispanic community might have been associated with like the LGBTQ community. So they wanted to make sure that people felt more accessible. And so they changed it to the Six Bridges, which is what Seis Puentes means. Um, and so that's when it changed in 2009 and it became what it is today. We've gone through ups, we've gone through downs, we've had different executive directors. One of our most notable is Hallie Schaffner. She was an executive director when she graduated from the Clinton School in 2012, I believe, which I was surprised to learn about a couple weeks ago. um, but so it's an organization that it's been up and down. And so my goal moving from Mexico City is to make sure that we can put it on a solid foundation and that it can be a staple organization for people in the region. And so taking what I've learned from the Clinton School, what I've learned from other organizations that I've worked at, whether it was in Tulsa, Arizona, or in Mexico City, being able to implement that on a large scale and treating this small nonprofit like it's a large nonprofit has been kind of one of my biggest challenges, but also it's incredibly rewarding. And so I'm happy to do it. But at Seis Puentes, since we've started, there's some metrics that have been kept, but not necessarily. And so what we do there is we offer ESL classes, so English as a second language. We teach folks English every week. We've been able to expand the program. So one thing that we noticed when we started was when the second administration took over, there was a huge reduction in attendance. And so originally at the Clinton School, my goal was my capstone project was to track engagement with 501c3 organizations and the populations that they serve. It wasn't approved by the International Review Board, but I pivoted. And so at Seis Puentes, we saw about a 90% reduction. So we saw classes go from 35, 40 people to 2 or 3 people. And so this is kind of just evident in the political world that we live in, is that people are afraid to leave their homes in a state that is so restrained, like Arkansas. I could imagine, it's probably incredibly difficult for a lot of folks. And so my goal has been kind of not only this aspect, which is getting to meet amazing people like you guys, but also really ingraining myself in the community that I serve. And so being present in every single class, shaking people's hands when they walk into the center, having normal conversations, getting to know them on a personal level. It's been incredibly rewarding and also incredibly challenging because, there's people that I've met who have since been deported since September, since I've met them. There's kids who will come to the center and their parents are no longer here and they're 10 and 12 years old, raising themselves. So these are the realities that a lot of people face, but it's not just 1 or 2 people. Unfortunately, it's incredibly common. And so these ESL classes, these English classes are an opportunity for not only people to learn a new language and to give themselves opportunity here in this country, but also to connect them to their children's education so that they can advocate for themselves. But also now these courses have become more of a third space. We've been able to kind of facilitate and manage an environment at Seis Puentes that makes people feel comfortable and it allows people to kind of feel relief outside of the real world. And so that's been incredibly exciting. Providing access to IDs, I kind of spoke about that a little bit earlier. The City of North Little Rock ID program that was started in 2021, and it's still going due to the current laws and regulations right now. There is no city ID program that is allowed to be operated using taxpayer dollars. What happened in 2021 was at the time, the mayor of the city of North Little Rock had decided he didn't want to create an entire division like the city of Little Rock had done. And so the city of Little Rock had created its own division. And so they had their own office where you could go and you could get your municipal ID. The city of North Little Rock said, we don't want to hire an entire new person and create a new staff, but we'll donate the machinery to somebody who's willing to operate. Well, Seis Puentes at the time was that organization who's willing to do that. And so through that legal loophole, we operate, all of our machinery was donated. We have hundreds of IDs still waiting to be printed. And that's how we're able to operate and continue to operate legally. And so it is not taxpayer money. It is donor funded and grant funded, but not right now, actually. So we also have a lot of youth and art programming. So we recently facilitated a spring break art camp through Kansas at the facility. My goal is to give as many people opportunities to things that you would think of for anybody else. And so they could be as simple as an art class, right? And so we were very happy to partner with Kansas and open up the doors to about, I believe it was 25 students who came to the center. It was both in English and in Spanish, and they just got to explore their creative side for an entire week. It was pretty great. Jose Hernandez, who's a pretty popular artist here in Central Arkansas, he actually facilitated the program. So that was great. And so we're happy to do that. As far as youth initiatives go, I work with the University of Arkansas at Little Rock, and I have a group of interns who come specifically to Seis Puentes, and they get a certain amount of hours and stipends to work with us. And we've worked on building a youth coalition. And so working with high school students from all over the central region to basically come and use Seis Puentes as a third space, but also to discuss a lot of current events, things going on within the region that, might not be highlighted on. I think when we think about a lot of youth grouping, typically it's merit-based. So it's always, the top academic performers, or it's, the most social students, but it's important that we kind of integrate students who aren't always the top academic performers. Some of these students have two jobs and they're 15. And so you want to be able to get their perspective. You want to be able to have them included in the conversation, but you also want to know what's going on in their homes. And so that's been something that's been incredibly important to me. Working with young people in Tulsa taught me that. And so I'm happy to do it. We connect families to resources. So we are a resource center. Any kind of resource that any of you could think of, any kind of resource that could ever be needed, whether it's automotive, medical, dental, we're able to direct people to them. These last couple of months have been incredibly exhausting. I do a lot of calling and I call organizations, buildings, businesses. I was going to say it in Spanish, if I can't remember the name, businesses. And my number one question is, do you serve the undocumented population? I cannot ethically work with people who are not willing to help anybody who is a part of the community that we serve. I don't ask people what their documentation status is, but I don't feel comfortable saying, I have a dentist here, but I don't know if they'll serve you because you're undocumented. So that's my number one question I ask folks. And so if you guys ever meet anybody or know anybody who is in need of a service, any kind of service, please refer them to us and we're happy to help. I have a huge list of references. Some of the names are more so private because that's what people prefer to keep it private. And I respect that, but also I'm happy to direct anybody for any kind of service that they might need. And so in addition to that, we do have cultural events and programming. It could be as big as Hispanic Heritage Festivals, which we've had for years in North Little Rock in the Argenta District. And then I've encouraged both my interns and a lot of the youth to kind of start creating small cultural programming. So for Valentine's Day, we had a Galentine's Day party. And so, a program that most people would think is catered toward teenage girls, we had a lot of middle-aged and older women come and participate in the program. And I think it's important to think about the fact that a lot of these people come to this country and they give up their youth. Education in their home countries is a privilege, and it's not a right like it is in the United States. And so most of the people that we serve don't have higher than a sixth grade education. And so, having to start working at a young age, you sacrifice a lot of those things. And I think that is incredibly important right now that we offer these kind of third spaces because it allows people to feel human. Right now, most people in the community that we serve feel like products. They feel like they are simply here to work and die. And so what can I do? What can we do to ensure that people have another space, have something to look forward to? Before most people felt comfortable going to the county fair or they felt comfortable going to even the Hispanic Heritage Festival. But right now, with police presence, ICE presence, the threat and of all those things, a lot of people don't feel comfortable leaving their homes. And so hosting movie nights, hosting game nights, those little things, although it seems like something minuscule, it means a lot to the people in the communities that we serve. Many of them have never even been to a movie theater, and so it's interesting, but it's fun to do things like that. And because we're an educational center, we try to educate people on everything. So for Valentine's Day, we have, a sheet, an educational sheet in Spanish at a third grade academic level that people can read. And it talks about the history of Valentine's Day and where does Galentine's Day come in. For Thanksgiving this past year, we fed over 800 people. We gave out food boxes. So in a couple partnerships, including with community potluck food rescue, we were able to donate 200 turkeys and boxes of food. And in each box, it had Thanksgiving foods. And so a lot of people were like, why are you giving, Thanksgiving foods? You should give them food like rice and beans and things that people are going to eat. And my biggest focus was that, like I said, for a lot of these families, they've never had an American Thanksgiving. American culture permeates. So people grow up around the world seeing Thanksgiving on TV or in movies, but they'll never experience it. And a lot of these people's kids are Americans. So they go back to school on Monday after Thanksgiving break and their family said, oh, we had turkey. Oh, we had mac and cheese. And growing up, I know what it's like to say, oh, we don't cook a giant bird, So, and so and so by being able to do that, you give them these food boxes, you're allowing them, you're ingraining them into the American culture and practices, but also, we put on informational sheets so that people know the significance of a turkey, of the stuffing, kind of like the pamphlets that I brought for you guys there. We've made trifolds. And so one of my interns did write about the history of Thanksgiving. So I'm sure there was language about genocide and they're college students. But it's important that people kind of know about that and why we celebrate Thanksgiving, why it's such a huge pillar of the American holiday season. So so yeah, so that's just another thing. And then of course our collaborations, continued collaborations with community partners and academic institutions. My goal is to work with as many schools and as many community partners as possible. Work in the nonprofit space is not possible without collaboration. You cannot, build your own empire on your own. And so by partnering with people, by getting to meet amazing folks like you guys, educating folks on the work that we do, it definitely opens up doors for us, but more so for the people that we serve. And so I'm happy to do it, especially for a lot of the interns. When I started, we started our program at UALR at the same time. And so they started at Seis Puentes at the same time I did. And so there was no curriculum put in place for them. There was nothing. But one thing that I learned from these interns, they're all first generation and they're all in the Spanish program. And so they range from 19 to 26 years old. And what I've learned is that most of them grew up here in Little Rock. And so they've lived here. They go to UALR. They live in, the Southwest region, which is kind of its own enclave. And so one of the first things I did, I received tickets to a play at one of the Arkansas theaters here. And it was last minute. And so I told my intern, I said, let's go to a play and let's go to happy hour before we go to the play. And one of my interns, she's 26, she said, I've never been to happy hour. And so I realized that not only is it my responsibility not to, teach them skills that they'll use in the professional world, but also to ingrain them in skills that are used in everyday practice for people in the professional world. I went to the University of Arizona, which is like your guys' U of A, it's quite huge. And so a part of the business college's practice is that you go to happy hour, you go to networking events. And what I realized is that this person who's 26 who graduates this May, who's older than I am, has never participated in something that is a pillar of the professional development world. In the professional world, everybody goes to happy hour. There's its own etiquette. There is rules. There's, you never order your own meal, but you will share an appetizer. Don't have more than two drinks. Don't have food and a drink in both hands. You have to shake someone's hand and then you have to put something down. Your name badge goes over your heart. These are things that you wouldn't think are important, but then once I'm talking about it, you're like, well, yes, because if somebody has their name badge on a weird spot, you're gonna go and talk about them. Or if you eat something with parsley, it's gonna get in your teeth. And so that has been something that for me has been incredibly important because while the education and the forward development of the people that we serve is important, this next generation of leaders and educated young people is equally as important. They're the first generation of people who are getting college degrees. And so what we see a lot in Arkansas is a lot of young people take their talent and leave. They go to New York, they go to Chicago, they go to Texas. What can we do? What can I do as a professional to make sure that they keep their brilliance here, that they continue to develop within this community? This is a great and vibrant community, and I'm happy to be here. Um, but that's one of the things that I like to focus on as well. So it seems like, just an internship program, but I think that it's kind of developed into something a little bit more. And so I'm happy to do it. Aside from that, a lot of our metrics go. So we've served over 5,000 people annually. We've issued over 1,161 municipal IDs, 225 participants in the ESL programs quarterly. Let's see here, 1,000 individuals fed through food and community food drives. So last Thanksgiving, we fed about 800 people. We try to do something typically before the end of each school year, from what I understand historically. This will be my first summer, and so I've actually been working with the food bank and Potluck Community Food Pantry to start our own food pantry. So Potluck donated a refrigerator, and we now have shelving. I just got to get the food. So we hope to start that hopefully by May 1st, and we'll call it 501 Day, which is exciting because your guys' area codes are all 501, and we're a 501c3. So that's what we hope to launch and start our food pantry, if not through donations, then at least community awareness and letting people know that that's our intent. It's going to be a choice pantry, so it's going to allow people to pick out the foods that they want. And because it's going to be facilitated through the food bank, we get to decide what foods we want to get from them. And so my goal is to get whole foods, kind of like rice, beans, lentejas, lentils, whole like grains and things that people in our community can really make stretch. A lot of the times, we in this country, we give out food boxes and it has raviolis and it has, canned mandarins. But the problem is when you move here from Honduras and you walk to this country on foot, you probably haven't had Chef Boyardee raviolis. So how does one cook that? How does one cook a can of chili? And so by giving people this autonomy to not only pick their own food, but also having options that make sense for them in their own homes is incredibly important. And so, um, like I've said, a lot of the programming and a lot of the things that I do is done with intention. And it's probably why it's taken so long for a lot of the programs that I've launched to take off is because I want to make sure that they're sustainable. I want to make sure that it's something that, 10 years from now, people could say, oh yeah, Seis Puentes teaches this. Or, oh yeah, if you need this, Seis Puentes probably has it. I think that one of the biggest disservices you can do to people is offering something and then, 3 months in, oh, we're not going to do it anymore. The instability is one, it's distasteful, but also especially right now, it's just such a disservice to the people that we serve because there's no stability in their lives. They don't know if they're going to go to work and if they're going to be able to come home and see their family. They don't know if their kids are going to, be harassed at school. And so by being able to offer services on a consistent basis, I'm happy to do it. We're happy to do it. So what do we get to witness on a daily basis? So at Seis Puentes, this is a little bit about us. Let's see, in the top right, you'll see this was kind of our food distribution for Thanksgiving. Below that is my interns from UALR. They're great. In the center, the big picture, this past Saturday, actually, we hosted a Primeros Auxilios por Salud Mental, which is hold on, youth mental health first aid for you. Okay, hold on. Mental health first aid for youth. And so that was through the National Council of Mental Health and Wellbeing. And so this is what we know as like a PD opportunity. It's a certification that is about 10 hours long. It's 1 day. And typically it's in English, but this program was done in Spanish. And so we actually did this through a partnership with an organization who received a grant from Children's Hospital. And so this organization is similar to Seis Puentes. They're called One Community, and they're out of Northwest Arkansas. So they work and operate in Springdale, and they do a lot of the same services and offer a lot of the same resources that we do at Seis Puentes. They're awesome. And so this was amazing for me because, well, I got to get my certification as well. It opened my eyes to a lot. I'm reminded that, education for a lot of people is not it's not a guaranteed right like it is in this country. And so when I say that, this was an opportunity that was offered to 20 people. We filled the seats, all 20 people came. But more than that, we had people come from Warren, from Eudora. There's another city that's Helena, St. Helena or Helena. There you go. So we had people, despite the fact that we serve Central Arkansas, we had people come from the Delta and Southern Arkansas just to take this class. It started at 7:30 a.m. So if you're driving 2 hours, you can imagine that they were up at 4 a.m. and nobody showed up in anything less than business casual. And the components, the people within the room, more so were housewives. They were cleaning staff. They were serving staff. They were members of the community that would not generally be offered an opportunity to be in a professional development role or opportunity. But for them, as much as they're learning a new certification and a new skill that they'll take back to their community, for them, this is an opportunity that they get to sit in a classroom in an academic setting and learn because it's something that was taken away from them at a young age. And so, you're challenged to reenact scenarios and you have to go about it kind of like when you're doing CPR. Everyone has to go and do their own CPR scenario. And at the beginning, everybody was a little bit apprehensive, but toward the end, I got emotional because I noticed that some of these people in another life, they could have won an Oscar. Seriously, and it's sad. And I think about my mom. I think about the fact that, coming to this country in a trunk, many of these people put themselves in a position where they are dehumanized on a daily basis. And they're happy to do it because it feeds their families. It allows their children to have an education. And so I had to put that picture in there because even though that was this past weekend, it meant a lot to me. And I was so, 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 so grateful that One Community was able to partner with us. And hopefully through children's, we're able to do one for adults, adult mental health. Below that, we had an open house at Seis Puentes. And so in the pink right here, kind of the bright red colors, you'll see these are people who have come to our English classes for the last 10 years. And so the young man in the red shirt above the lady in the pink, which is kind of hard to see, but he actually started to come to Seis Puentes as a baby. And so his parents came from Colombia. and they've been taking the English classes for 10 years. And as much as I love Achilles and Alejandra, they know no English. But this is their family. They have no family in this country. So the community, the aspect of community is incredibly important to them. Alejandra, his mom, who's wearing pink in the center, she was a lawyer in Colombia before they had to seek asylum. And now she cleans at Edwards. And so it just goes to show once again how humble so many people can be. And so when I found that out, I had told her, I said, I want to go to law school potentially after graduating from Clinton School. She told me, oh, I was a lawyer in Columbia. I said, oh my gosh, well, looks like we're going to take the LSAT together. And so her and I have started studying law and Spanish just for fun, even though Colombian law is much different than American law. It gives people a sense of identity. It gives people a sense of worth, and that's incredibly important. Um, and so I love the work that I do. I'm deeply ingrained in it. This young girl right here, her and her mother, they're from Guatemala. They were some of the first people that I met when I came to Seis Puentes. I started on September 1st, and they probably came in September 5th. And her mom is illiterate, and she is one of the smartest little girls you'll ever meet. Unfortunately, they were both deported this past December. And so it's hard because you build relationships with people and you get to know them and you have their number and you send them text messages and then the messages, they are read. And then you send them text messages and then one day the messages just stop getting received. Um, and so that's one of the hardest aspects of this work. But it's also important to educate a lot of people in this community that these are people who live next door to you. These are the people who serve you in every single aspect and every single day. Here in Arkansas, work is a little bit more industrial. It's a little bit different. In California, in the Northern Valley, where I'm from, California is responsible for producing 1/3 of America's produce. And so you could point to a tree, you could point to a vine, I could tell you what's going to grow out of it. And that was my childhood. That's how I was raised. And I'm so proud to be in a position where I can educate and help other people acknowledge and know the work that my people do. Um, I think that we go a lot by merit in this country. What kind of GPA did you have? What kind of degree? Where did you go to school? But some of the smartest people I know can't read. My grandfather, I talk about the story of the hamburger. And whenever I write a grant, federal grant, I write about the hamburger. Every time I go to a restaurant with my grandfather, he orders a hamburger. Whether we're at Olive Garden, whether we're at Chili's, whether we're at a fancy restaurant, he'll order a hamburger. And he does this not because he loves a hamburger, but because he doesn't have the freedom of autonomy to read a menu. He can't see options. He can't decipher what he wants to order and what different options there are available to him. So he always orders a hamburger. And because of his pride, he doesn't want to be a burden to anybody. It's not a conversation. Oh, are you sure you don't want? No, a hamburger. That's his quick answer, just a hamburger. And you have to respect that. But he can put a car together bolt by bolt in 2 days. You could take apart a car completely and he could put it together in 2 days, bolt by bolt. And so it's important to remind people that, as hardworking and as selfless as a lot of the people that we serve are, we're still human. We're still people. And I think that moving to Arkansas has been really hard because a lot of the nonprofit structures that I've encountered and worked alongside, it still somehow happens to be a means of earning money, or it's a business. And so what I tell a lot of people, especially in the Hispanic community that I serve, is that I have my education. My resume can carry me to New York City. It can take me to Mexico City. It can take me wherever I want. But I also remind people that our people aren't a product. We're not a group of people to be made money out of. And so the mindset and the things that I've witnessed here in Arkansas, especially with philanthropy and nonprofit, the beggars can't be choosers. I don't abide by that. I think if you're going to offer something to somebody, it should be within the best intent. And if you're going to feed somebody, don't feed them ice cream. Feed them a meal that they can be sustained off of, right? And not just to say I just fed them. Well, okay. Um, and so that is kind of a wrap on Seis Puentes and a little bit of the work that we do. But it is very multifaceted. No day looks the same, whether we're offering an art camp or we're teaching English or we're teaching sewing classes or we're teaching acrylics or pastels. anything that we can do, any opportunity, any volunteers looking to offer their skills, their talents, their time, we're always happy to help you guys. I recently started kind of collecting names and people who are interested, and so we started a newsletter, and that's been a lot, but there's about 350 people in the newsletter and about 150 volunteers registered. And so hopefully I can figure out how to start utilizing that to its full advantage, but I'm one person. I'm the only full-time employee at Seis Puentes. And so everything that I've been able to do is, of course, with the help and collaboration of my interns, but they only work maximum 6 hours a week. And then volunteers are in and out whenever they can. We have two teachers who teach English, and then we have one teacher, Miss Jenny, and she teaches and facilitates the art programming, and she's done that for about 15 years. And so my goal within this next year is to expand English access and English programming. I want to expand art programming. I want to make sure that not just adults, but also students and young people have an opportunity to kind of access their creative side, but also, they could be the next artists, the next, big thing in this country, and you would never know. When I left and I moved to Arizona, I remember going to a track and field opportunity and seeing some of the people's times. And I was stunned because they were so slow. They're at a major university and some of them ran so slow. And I was like, in my high school, some of these guys could run a mile in 4 minutes. But nobody will ever know that because we grew up in the Central Valley. If you guys have ever seen McFarland USA, I encourage you to go watch it. It's very spot on. It's called McFarland. It is on Disney Plus, and it is a small town in the Central Valley, Southern Central Valley, about 45 minutes outside of Bakersfield. Um, but it is 110% accurate in how many of people grew up in the Central Valley. And so I think about that a lot. But yeah, so if anybody has any questions or if you guys want to know more, please, please, please feel free to reach out. This opportunity and opportunities like this mean a lot to me. I started in September, and so since September, my goal has been to start marketing, getting people to know what the organization is. Not everybody has to donate, but at least people know what it is. One of the first things we did, I started September and October 15th, we had an open house. And at that same time, that's when the administration started really reinforcing heavily these ICE raids. And the governor had also decided that they were going to bring the National Guard to help with detainment. And so what I decided with my PR training was that if we had an open house and we had people come into the building and I took people's pictures, should they ever come to the building, people would know that this is a well-attended space, that there is more than just certain people that, come here. And I always tell people, I'm first generation American. My father is mixed. He's African American and white. And my mom is Mexican. I was raised with my mom. And so a lot of people are always curious about my name, Eric Brown. It's my dad's. But I also am happy to tell people that I am always willing to put myself in an uncomfortable situation because I know my privilege and the opportunities that I hold over people in my community. Simply having a Hispanic name in today's day and age is putting you in a vulnerable state. And I know that if somebody named Eric Brown is detained by ICE, that's going to be a problem. And so, I'm happy to do that. But please, if any of you have any questions, if you would like to get involved or know more, this is a QR code you can scan. But I also brought you all literature, so you don't necessarily need to scan it because that QR code's on the literature as well. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. How many people since this administration, how many people in our area in Arkansas have been deported? I mean, and because we don't, like, I noticed that there's not as many Hispanics in the stores and stuff that there used to be. I noticed there's not as many working in stores and things that they used to do. So I'm not in where ICE is. So I'm just kind of curious, how many people do you know of in Arkansas that have been deported?
So I've tried to get those numbers. You actually can't anymore. So before there used to be a lot of transparency with the federal government. You would be able to call detention centers and they would be able to give you kind of numbers or metrics on who's been deported, who's been detained. Now the detention centers will send you straight to voicemail. You can go and you can look on the Homeland Security website. The numbers are always inaccurate. Sometimes the numbers are up, sometimes the numbers are down. There's no way to actually tell how many people have been deported, how many people have been detained. But it's significant, and I think that it's something that I've never experienced before. And it's incredibly disheartening, but it could be hundreds, it could be thousands, it could be tens of thousands. What we see right now, a lot of people do is a lot of people have started having in their households, if there were two parents working, they've gone down to a one income household. And so one of the parents stays home and one of the parents works. And this is kind of insurance so that, if there is an ICE raid, if somebody does get deported or whatever, that there's always going to be somebody at home with one of their kids.
So if they're detained in some kind of detention center, what is the average stay there? I mean, how do they get out and where do they go? And if they do go back to their country, like the ones that came because of they were what I'm looking for, asylum, asylum, yeah. How did they do when they go back to the country they came from? Or are they going back to the country they came from?
Yeah, so, well, that's funny that you say that. So it's pretty complicated. So actually, there's a lot of immigrants who will practice the Mexican accent. And so whether you're from Chile, whether you're from Colombia, whether you're from Venezuela, they'll practice the Mexican accent. So if they do get deported, they get deported to Mexico because that's the closest place to the US border. So so yeah, so I will share with you, I think one thing too that kind of gets passed on a lot of people in our community is that a lot of people are incredibly impoverished. Here in Central Arkansas, I will say most folks are from Central America, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador. And so they are really starting up their journeys here in America. Um, I know for Mexican folks, a lot of us, we have these large networks of people. And so when it comes to detainment or deportation, we typically have, my family, for example, we have a bank account that we all put into, and it has $50,000. And those $50,000 go toward lawyer fees, they go toward detention fees, whatever that might be. When you asked how long it takes between a person getting detained and deported, it depends. If they're asylum seeking, it depends on what country. Before we invaded Venezuela, um, it might have taken that person who was Venezuelan to get detained. It might have taken them 6 to 8 months before they actually decided whether or not they were going to deport them back to Venezuela. Now, because the United States has influence in Venezuela, it could take a week. Um, it depends on the person, it depends on the case. If people find out that their relative has been detained, they immediately get on it, they find a lawyer. They don't always like that. What they'll do is, let's say somebody is detained here in Arkansas, the next day they send them to Louisiana, and then the next week they'll send them to Texas so that their family can't track them down. If their family can't track them down, a lawyer can't track them down, and a lawyer can engage in an asylum process, or they can engage in the political process. And so incredibly hard. But it's different. It's different depending on the person. It's on each basis. It's a case by case basis. And so it could be a couple days, it could be a couple months. There's people who have been in detention for a year. When my stepfather was detained, he was in detention for about 3 weeks, and we were able to get a lawyer and figure his entire situation out relatively quickly. But even then, being married to an American, already in the process to getting his green card, he was arrested, detained, put in a detention center in southern Arizona with no air conditioning um, for 3 weeks. And so it's different. It's different depending on the person, but people have their own tactics. They learn the Mexican accent. They meet people, they meet coworkers, and they learn, they'll take on their friend's identity and they'll say, my name is Maria Carmen Eguilis, and I'm from, this part in Sonora. Oh, that's a border town right next to the US-Mexico border. Sometimes they'll keep them in detention knowing that they're from a border town.
Well, what happens when they go to Mexico and they find out they're not really in Mexico?
Well, that's something that really doesn't affect the United States government. What they do is you'll get to Mexico, they'll process you, and then it's just like getting let out of jail. They just kind of open the doors and then you fend for yourself.
What if you know a person that's like comes out in the morning, they're undocumented, from Guatemala. And they come out in the morning, go to work, and then they go back home in the evening. What advice do you give that person?
So one thing that I've been doing, and so I'm going to ask you all to please never pass judgment if you see somebody with certain stickers on their car. One thing that I've been doing is I like to give out biblical stickers, and I like to give out the Blue Lives Matter stickers so people can put them on their cars.
What was that?
The Blue Lives Matter stickers, the police stickers, the blue line in it. Yeah, so kind of ways to distract or kind of yeah, so people kind of find their own ways of doing that. A lot of people um some of the people, I think one of the hardest things is a lot of people in my community find humor in everything. And so like some of them, they will buy new cars every couple months. And so what I've seen when I started in at Seis Puentes was like when we teach English classes, people would come in these work vans and the work vans had the ladders on top and whatever. And now they started driving these huge Suburbans. So what you'll see, kind of like I've never seen so many large SUVs in my life until I moved to Arkansas, but a lot of people drive these large XL SUVs and Suburbans. And so what they'll do is they'll buy these huge Suburbans and they'll take all the seats out except for the two front seats, and they'll put all of their equipment in the back, the ladders, the tools, whatever they need in order to go to work. And so it's very reminiscent of what at least I would say reminiscent of 1930s Germany, and that people have to kind of disguise themselves in order to survive. But the truth is the show has to go on. Their kids have to continue to eat. They have to continue to provide medicine for their families in their home countries. And so that's what they'll do. That's
There's nothing legal you can tell them. There's nothing legally they can do if they undocumented.
I mean, no, there's nothing that I can do. I wouldn't, I mean, being
Legally.
legally, no, and especially because I operate a 501(c)(3), but I can always leave things out and I can always be suggestive. And I can always clock out and give my 2 cents and then clock back in as a free citizen. But yeah.
I was just saying as a friend, and if they ask you, what can I do? There's really nothing you can do other than just.
Whatever people are doing right now is the best that they can do. I think that's like the biggest thing. Incredibly adaptive people, incredibly smart, incredibly savvy. But yeah, I mean, any way that you can support them, any way that, you can help folks. Yeah.
Population you think of Hispanics and of that Hispanic, is that even the right phrase? Is that sort of like saying black? No, that I don't know what it.
I think Hispanic, so it's interesting. I think it like the vocabulary changes. I used to use Latine, which is like Latino, but with an E at the end. And so I think that that's just a little bit more gender neutral. It's not suggestive of male because
Right.
it's not masculine. I know a lot of young people use Latinx. I don't use that because Hispanic people read it or Latino people read it and be like, what is this? But I use Latine. You could use Latino, you could use Hispanic. But I think Hispanic, a lot of people try to like deviate from it because it suggests that people are of Spanish origin. And here in Arkansas, most people being from Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, 80 to 90% of them are indigenous. And so they're not Hispanic at all. They're Latino. Yeah. Yeah. So
That are from Europe.
Yeah.
And they're here and they're not legal.
yeah.
Long story, but anyway,
Yeah, I've had Ukrainian people come in. I've had people from Jamaica, Sierra Leone. I've worked with people from, there was a lady from Uzbekistan. I thought that was pretty interesting, very far from home. Um, but yeah, anybody who needs services, because at the end of the day, whether it's medical services or, interpretation, as if we can help, we can help. Yeah.
Well, to me, first of all, I don't know if you know this group or not, but we're all out there farming against what's happening. We're very much, want to do something, want to do more.
Yeah.
So that aside, I cannot believe, I mean, I wish there was some way, or if you, any way, not as you're promoting it, because then that would get you in trouble, but how do we get the population to know that this is what's happening and how many people? I have seen, I even one time went out to my garbage can, believe it or not, and there were two really neat backpacks that pulled the backpacks out and when I went through the paper, there were 1099s for two Hispanic big men who worked at, one of the garden centers. I called, oh yeah, they work for us, I'll get their supervisor to call you. 2 days later, I hadn't heard anything. I called, oh, they don't work for us. Now, I don't know whether they had to quit their job, but obviously they got so scared. These were really nice backpacks. I mean, I gave them goodwill. I thought somebody should get to use them. I took the paper stuff out of it. But that's how acute it came, what you're talking about is so acutely wrong.
So
It's not the Germany 1938, and you didn't say it as wrong. That's what I say all the time. I can't believe what we're doing in this country and how can we multiply the effect of what we've got that we can do?
So I think the biggest thing, and this is what I recommend to a lot of people, is just opportunities like this, getting to know people. I think my biggest criticism, I'm not from here, and my biggest criticism is of the Hispanic population and community here already that is well established, the folks that are in my position that do have an education, that do work within nonprofit or philanthropy, that do not focus as much on the social advocacy aspect of what their job should require of them. And so I actually am encouraging a lot of people that I work alongside to get out there and put themselves in front of crowds like you guys to integrate themselves. I think I don't know if it happened or not, but like one of the things that I did was work with a marketing company. And so if you go to Express RX, I think up here in the Heights or off Cantrell, on there, when you get a receipt for your medication, on the back of it is advertisement. So I put Seis Puentes on one of those advertisements. That immediately started getting us phone calls. And so just kind of, I started putting signs up in Milo's Coffee. Um, if you guys would like to take some literature, I have some. You're more than welcome to put it up around town. I would love that. Keep some for yourselves, please. If you would like, I can email you guys some and you guys can print it. Yeah.
Well, I want to say, since you said something in regards to a garden center, it is possible that it's that place in Little Rock called the Good Earth Garden Center. Because, at Pleasant Ridge Town Shopping Center in Little Rock, that the fresh market and Belk and stuff is in. For the landscaping for that shopping center, it's, people that are, work for the landscaping department. The Good Earth Garden Center's landscaping department. And, yeah, I told them hi and I told them I did it. They did a great job but like from December to February, you won't see them that much, of course. And one of them said, the men that work for them that are from Mexico, they go there then to visit their relatives.
Yeah.
But I'm very happy for the Good Earth Garden Center and all the businesses that let the Hispanic people work for them, since the Hispanic people need the money too.
Yeah.
And I know a little bit of Spanish and a lot of Hispanic, and I think a lot of Hispanic and Latino people are very nice. And I tell them hi in Spanish and ask them, how are you? And
I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, we really appreciate that. And if you guys know any business owners or are, familiar with anybody, I think one of the biggest things too, Yellow Rocket Concepts, who they own a couple of restaurants like tacos and tamales or yeah. But they're pretty awesome. And so I had actually gotten a call from I don't know if she's a director or manager, but she wanted to find a way to get her staff integrated with our programs, and she wanted to advocate on their behalf because she knows that many of them are they're capable of being within management. They just don't speak English. So what can she do in order to teach them workplace English? That was something that touched me deeply. And so I immediately started thinking, how can I teach, workplace English and like fundamental English? But support businesses like that. But if you guys know of anybody, if you guys would like to recommend anybody, there's a bookstore in Petaway, and they started selling stickers, and the proceeds of those stickers go to Seis Puentes. I'm incredibly grateful for that. And so any type of collaboration, any type of, form of working together that we can do, I would love that. But it doesn't always have to be money wise. It can be through, you know, recognition. It can be through acknowledgement, simply allowing us to keep one of our posters up in your business. I mean, things like that. Oh, sorry.
I think what you're doing is great and wonderful. I know our immigration system is terribly broken here in the United States, and it's been broken for decades. Well, one of the things I always wondered is when we do have people coming into the country and who are applying for citizenship, that we don't have better programs to assimilate them into our culture, because I think that's part of why we have so much dissension. And you know, there are a lot of people who are not integrated and they don't, it's something very foreign to them, and they wonder why these people don't know what we know and all of that. It's because we don't have any. The United States does a terrible job of integrating people and assimilating people. I know, like I can remember my grandparents, I mean, my mom, I'm talking about my grandparents when they came from Italy, because my mom was the second generation or the third generation, and how they didn't want to speak anything but English, and did not allow their children to speak anything but English because they wanted to be American. And they tried very hard to assimilate into the culture of American culture. And I just think we just don't do enough of that, you know, like, and so it makes it this division we have, which is kind of sad, because we're all human beings, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's hard. I think it depends on where you go. If you go to Massachusetts, if you go to California, there are those kind of immersion programs, but they're state funded. And they're very, very well, handsomely funded. They give people living stipends. They give people requirements and educational requirements to fill out before they can apply for jobs. In Canada, Canada has a nationwide program that requires people to learn French to gain a basic education. And then they're required to apply for jobs within the first X amount of months of them being within the country. It is doable. It's incredibly doable. But when you have unwelcoming environments and when you have, you know, states in Arkansas, there was actually, and we had helped facilitate the Afghan refugee resettlement in 2017. Yeah. So like that was amazing. That was 2017. It's since been done away with. And there's no consistency. You know, in California, at least there's consistency. At least the programs have been longstanding for 40 plus years. And so that's one of those things where like we could probably advocate, we could probably ask for something to be on a ballot. But I think it has to be done incrementally. So yeah. Yes.
You know, many nonprofits have felt very threatened under this administration, and I wondered if Seis Puentes has had any repercussions.
Eric Brown at Seis Puentes has had a couple of repercussions. I'm not really, as for myself, I'm not really worried. I think the worst thing that could happen is that our 501(c)(3) designation gets stripped from us. So unfortunately, no. So unfortunately, before me, Seis Puentes had never applied to a single grant. And so majority of our funding was through private donors. And one thing that I've learned and that I analyzed while being here and at the Clinton School is that each region in the country has its own different philanthropic pyramids. And here in the South, it's not necessarily what you know, it's who you know. And so one of the biggest things was when we saw Donald Trump win his reelection, we lost 80 to 90% of that private funding. And so people who thought of us as, you know, their fun charity check decided, oh, we're not going to give this year. And so we lost about 80 to 90% of that funding. And so I've been applying for a lot of grants, but I've also been very cognizant of the fact that I have to remain more so politically neutral and not advocate on the behalf of any political party. But I also know that it's not illegal to state facts. And so, but I will say Hallie Schaffner being our former executive director, you know, more than a decade ago, that has been a challenge. And there's been a couple of newspapers that I've had to reach out to. There's been a couple of articles on Twitter we've had to shut down. So aside from everything on a daily basis, there is a little bit of that PD aspect or PR aspect. And so every time I see her, she's like, I'm so sorry. I just tell her it's okay. It's okay. It's a part of it. But it's not something that it's not too big of a challenge. Yeah, yes.
There's a room that I think all of us would agree with, just it has to be nice. There is certain spirit of this country that is teaching hate.
Mm.
It is taking the example of one immigrant who kills a person and say that's the population. It's saying that we've got a population of murderers, how do we blunt that out?
You have to remind people, you have to be empathetic. You have to remind people, I think stories like mine, we're people, we're human. We live, eat, breathe amongst everybody. We contribute. I think it's funny. Somebody was saying to me, I don't understand why Hispanic people are, just they're getting all of this heat. They're God-fearing. They have families. They're very traditional. They love their neighbors. And here in the South, that holds a lot of weight because of religious context, right? And
The president.
well, yeah, the president. It's interesting. The president is he's doing a lot of his own advocacy right now, and
But he's trying, and that accomplishes what he wants.
yeah,
It's not that he cares even.
yeah. I don't know. I mean, I could go on and on about the hypocrisy. I know that I would welcome his wife into my center any day. You know, she could learn a thing or two from one of our programs. His son is the first same generation as I am. My last name Brown. I'm very happy and very proud to say that my last name Brown goes back to 1720s Pennsylvania, so I'm more American than Donald Trump. Um, but um, but you can never lead and go through with leadership in life thinking that you're better than the person next to you. It doesn't get you anywhere. And um, I think that, this administration and this president, they've made their decision and they decide to move the way that they want to. I cannot continue to go through by my work kind of being vindictive and challenging if I challenged every single thing that came out of that White House, I would be out of breath. And so, yeah, yes.
Well, I just wanted to say, you are such a beautiful person.
you.
Your heart, I can tell, and I love that. It seems like you're living it. It's not just a job to you, like taking the person to the happy hour. What a beautiful thing, that we can adopt that too, if we have
We
Latino
don't like
friends or,
happy hour.
Right?
All of it. But also, I think too, for me, I'm a good Catholic girl, and so I pray very hard for Donald Trump and the administration, because a lot of things that people think is because of fear. There's so much fear-based, and I think what you're doing is you can rub off on a lot of people how to treat other people and how to help educate people so that they can have a better life.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you. Yeah. My number one thing that I always think about, and I tell my interns, is I always think about my mother.
Yeah.
Would this food box be good enough for my mother? Would this English class be good enough for my mother? When you lead with that mindset, it really changes the circumstances of the way that you go about things. I think that
Right.
politicians could learn a lesson or two from that as well. Would cutting this program off help your mother? Things like that. But yeah.
Church, which is a lot of these Hispanics, I wonder if they are afraid to come sometimes, but how well has it responded to the needs of the undocumented Hispanics? Or has it?
I haven't really ingrained myself in the Catholic Church as much as maybe I could.
Might be a place for support.
Yeah, absolutely. I've actually been like incredibly verklempt with the assistance from like the United Methodist Church, but they're also the ones who initiated Seis Puentes in the 90s. I will say that one of my biggest biases that I've been challenged to overcome since moving to the South was um, what I believed kind of religious dominance look like. And so, coming here and realizing that there's so many people within these communities, within these groups who are actually willing to advocate and work on behalf of so many who do need help and do need the services has been really, really refreshing. I grew up oddly Lutheran. And so culturally, I want to say culturally Catholic and then actually religiously Lutheran. And so very similar to the Catholic Church. It's especially because we're the Missouri Synod, which is incredibly conservative and traditional. But yeah, and so there's been a lot of lessons for me in there, and And I think that the Catholic Church has been involved at the most that it can be, but also I think that because, how do I say this? Because there is this fight for non-bipartisanship within certain churches, specifically maybe within the Catholic Church, because it's so large here in Little Rock. It might be something that the Catholic Church decides that they might want to help more with one thing and relax on another. And then that's where another religious organization comes in. And so I've been able to see that if it's not the Catholic Church, it's definitely one of the other churches who do step in. But as many of the gaps that can be filled are filled. As far as I'm concerned, as far as food supplementation, providing diapers, providing formula, providing, extracurricular activities for students, scholarships. I think that is all great. So yeah. Yes.
Then when you spied the North Little ID program, I might have missed it. Is it active or not? Oh, okay, the pros and cons of this, how far does it go? Is it limited to, the idea is somebody's, it's an ID, so it's somebody, what does it do for one individual?
Yeah, so the municipal ID, I mean, for somebody like myself, born in the United States, it's a pretty useless ID. There's not much that I can do that a driver's license can't do. But for folks who don't have access to primary identification in this country, it changes a lot for them. And so what you need to have in order to get one is some form of primary identification, whether that's from your home country or the consulate. It could be a consular ID, it could be a passport, as long as it's not expired. We can take that and then we can use that information and fill it out. And you also have to have proof that you live within the city of North Little Rock. So that could be a phone bill, that could be car insurance, that could be anything. And this ID, what it does is it opens doors for people to register their kids for school. It allows them to put a light bill in their name. It allows them to get an apartment in their name. It allows them to register their children at the hospitals. I've had people come in with newborn babies that have the membrane still on them and they don't get a birth certificate because they have no formal ID. And so it changes a lot for them. And it's things, putting a light bill in your name, putting the gas bill in your name, registering your children for school, things that you and I would think is first nature. You don't even think like, oh, did I even need my ID for that? Versus a lot of these people, they can't wait to get their hands on an ID so that their electric bill is not in their cousin's name, or so that they can rent an apartment under their own name. And then also for some banks, most banks have kind of stopped utilizing this as a secondary form of identification. But for some banks, they still allow it. And so it allows people to open up banks in their own name as well. Yes.
First of all, I would like to own a Catholic church. Catholic charities, they refer a lot of things that came.
But I don't know, does he know who you are? Tell him what you do.
Oh, my name is Margaret Douglas. I'm with Helping Hands of Greater Little Rock. My first encounter was when COVID came around. Someone reached out to me from the Clinton Library, and believe it or not, that was my first time in a trailer park. 2020. They told me there were children there that were not being fed. Some teachers reached out and told me there were children there that were not being accepted here. And some of them were on suicide watch. I heard all sorts of stories. It makes a difference. You hear these things, you see them on the news, and I guess I can speak it because the Black person of color. I know what you're going through. They show the bad parts.
That's exactly what I'm saying. They pick out finding someone who's, say that the whole group is like
But
that.
until you actually get on the ground and go and spend some time with somebody who's a little different from you. When I went out there, and at first they were afraid of us. My husband drives a white truck. We got all together, all the food from, they had lunches there. I was twice today. And some of the restaurants, because they were unable to sell the food, the government paid them and we would load the truck up. And you have love transcends all of everything going on. We went and they were afraid of us first. They didn't know who I was going on. So this was back in 2020, 2021. once somebody recognized me that had been to the food pantry, it made all the difference in the world. Everybody opened up their doors, but we had to show this love first. That, and I kept going back. They wouldn't come out of their houses for the food. I had food. And finally, after somebody told me it was okay, we had a flat tail. My husband, we had a flat tire. Everybody came out. They all but lifted their truck off the ground without a chat. And they were in love with it. It was, you know, it makes a difference. And the Catholic charities reach out, not once a week, I get notice of somebody. I have people that come there. It's a matter of that. You have to give that trust. Let them build their trust.
Yeah.
And then I have people that they spend so much time with me, they even come to my house because they need somebody who can tell them about what's going on. And I applaud you for what you're doing.
Thank
I
you.
know that you're going through a lot. I'm here for you. And if half of the community knows I'm here for, you know, my back door is always open. I'm here. And like you said, I want the children, no matter what color they are, to know, just like at Christmas time, I knew of a group that needed some things, because you don't want any child to go back to say, to hear about some kid eating Cocoa Puffs or whatever. I don't have any children. You want all the children to be the same. When children go back after a holiday, you want them to say, I got something for Christmas.
Yeah.
But when they're hiding about what this country is doing to this time, they don't know, and they just want to blend in with the other children. That's what's wrong with the world right now.
Yeah.
Our children just want to blend in no matter who they are. And we have adults, sometimes we need to take adults out of the picture, representing this compassion. That's a sad situation.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. It means a lot. Yes, no, and it means a lot to a lot of people in our communities. You know, growing up, um, my mother always used to tell us about Mr. Claxton. And so my grandparents and my mom, when they came to this country, they worked on, it's a squash plantation in Northern California. And Mr. Claxton used to give my grandfather all of his old clothes, and he taught my mother how to read and write in a checkbook so that my mom didn't have to work in the fields, so that she could write people's checks as they came in from the fields. Um, and she always, nonstop, will always remind me about the kindness of Mr. Claxton, and that he was Pentecostal, I believe. But it just all the things. And so there is, in every single household, there is a story. It is always remembered. It's never something that we take lightly. We remember every single person, every single hand that has touched our lives, and we reflect on it. I think that, as you guys have been talking about, you know, this division, for us, it's quite the opposite. There's no hate in our hearts toward anybody, because for many of us, this country is the land of opportunity. It's the difference between being able to learn and not being able to learn, being able to feed your family, not feed your family, being able to wear and do whatever you want and be whoever you want to be, and not having that opportunity. And you know, my grandmother, she always used to call us Mexicans of discretion. She never let us wear a Mexican flag. She didn't like us speaking in Spanish excessively in public, even though she didn't speak any English. And but whenever we got back into the house, she was Catholic, very traditional, very much back to our culture, back to our roots. But it was a sense of appreciation for the fact that we were able to be in this country. She always used to tell us, you know, it's a privilege that we get to be in this country. We have no right to be here, and they don't want us here. So behave and do the best that you can and be the best that you are. And be, well, and I'm grateful, you know, I'm the only one out of my cousins who is half not Mexican, right? And so I always challenge those frameworks and those mindsets all the time. But it is unfortunate that people have to find a way to assimilate, and they do the absolute best that they can, even if that means dehumanizing themselves a little bit. And but really, truly, like stories like yours, stories like all of you guys who do go out of your way to make a difference and to make impact, it means a lot to us. It means a lot to me, because I know how it changes the lives of so many of the people that we serve. So yeah, thank you.
Eric, I want to say to you that we appreciate so much your information that you gave about Seis Puentes, but more than that, your personal stories and your experiences. That's what means so much, and that is what connects.
Well, thank
So
you so
thank
much.
you very
Thank
much.
you, thank you. I'm happy to do it.
Absolutely.